So Hyperledger Sawtooth, this is a project that Intel started and then spun out as a Hyperledger project. It's a way of building a permissioned blockchain using their SGX technology. So SGX is sort of like the secure enclave. It's a trusted processor inside of most Intel CPUs. And what it's doing is in the back end, it's generating secure random numbers. And it's using those secure random numbers to elect the next person to validate a block. So it's giving you this distributed way of electing a trusted authority for that block to submit the next block of the blockchain. So I'm going to cover this a little bit in more detail next week. But we have this canonical toy. It's like the Hello World app of blockchain. It's a task list. And as part of this task list, you're going to be creating a project that has your tasks in it. It's sort of like a mini Trello. Create the project, create the task within the project, and then add users and contributors to that task is the beginning. And then you can edit the task and then progress the task into different stages. And this is all being kept on the back end. It's all being kept consistent and replicated and up to date using Hyperledger Sawtooth APIs. So that's what it is. And I want you to go through the process of incrementally building this app up. I'm not going to have you write the whole app. In fact, what we're going to do, and I'll show you in pictures, is we're going to build parts of it, small parts of it, incrementally. I want you, for each stage, so there are 4 different steps to this lab. For each step, I want you to copy the code to a directory in your Git repo. And then when you are done with that lab, commit and push your changes that implement that lab to GitLab. Okay, so this is the picture, and it's quite a busy picture. You have, so one of the nice things, so if you've taken the cloud class, you've seen that everything has gone to a REST API. This is like the one way to interact with just about any web service. And with Hyperledger Sawtooth, that's no different. So Hyperledger Sawtooth, which is this picture, these are the parts to it. So this is it's a distributed collection of Sawtooth nodes in this case. And within one of these Sawtooth nodes, there is a validator, there is a transaction processor, and then there is a REST API for you to interact with the blockchain, the Sawtooth blockchain. And so what you do is you supply the application logic, and you supply the API calls into this REST, or the calls from the client into this REST API, and then it will basically store all of those transactions on the back end that you can then, at a later time, retrieve. And so this is what we're going to be building. The first thing that you're going to do is we're going to give you all of this. All of the code for implementing that to-do list is running on a service called bc.org/ctf.org. So blockchain.org/ctf.org. And you'll see this in the code lab. It's there, so you don't have to write it down. And bc.org/ctf.org has this TCP 8008 port set up, and it implements the entire backend logic. And the first thing we want you to do is use Python to implement client calls into this API to our hosted backend. And so this gives you, what is the abstraction that's being provided? Like, how did how can we provide a nice wrapper so that someone who's just an API, or just a developer, doesn't have to worry about the details of the backend processing infrastructure? So that's the first lab. The second lab is to then, so this is done with simple Python commands. So in the command line of Python, you're going to run a script, Python script, and then give it the transaction name, the parameters, and you'll see that it works. Get that to work. And then you're going to build a Python Flask front end to build a web application around it. So that's the second part. And then this is basically the same lab, but now you have a web UI for interacting with this backend system. The third lab, and the third lab is the hard lab, you'll then look at the back end. We will give you a skeleton of the back end code that has some of the functions implemented, and then you'll just fill in some of the rest of those. And you'll see there's a structure to the code, so it should be fairly obvious how to add things to the back end. And this is all Python, which is why Python was required for this course. You're building the transaction processor for validating those client requests. And then finally, after you've added this functionality, you're going to modify the web application so that you can take advantage of the code that you've written on the back end by using those APIs. Okay? And hopefully you'll get an idea of what is going on here. And yeah, there are this is a work in progress on the back end, but it gives you a flavor for the kinds of development that you would do if you ended up wanting to go that route. Okay, are there any questions about the labs? One of the things I should mention up front is that this thing is very buggy because it's our code. So if at any point you are blocked with some strange message, it's likely not you, it's likely us. So yeah, just post that on the channel, and yeah, we'll have to figure out a way of getting it to work. So okay, and with that, that's all I have for today. So you're welcome to start with those labs. Start with the first homework, get all your accounts set up, and then start with the labs. And I'll stay around if you need help with anything.